By early 2002, the 80s nostalgia wave was in full effect, with properties like G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Masters of the Universe all having successful relaunches. With that in mind, attention would soon turn to the other major 1980s toy property to get relaunched, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Granted, the Heroes in the Half Shell hadn't been as dormant quite as long as some of those other properties, as the original animated series ended in 1996, and that was followed by the infamous live-action Next Mutation series, which ended in 1998. But still, the idea of a new take on the Turtles proved intriguing. Eventually, 4Kids Entertainment would step up with an adaptation that would hew closer to the comics and be more serious than the humorous tone of the previous animated series.
There were still plenty of skeptics out there, as this was 4Kids, the same people responsible for Jelly Donuts and Pokemon, Invisible Guns and Yu-Gi-Oh!, and of course, unleashing the horror that is the One Piece rap.
His name's Zolo, he's just like a samurai, and a L-A-D-Y, Nami's not shy. Give it up, Lupe!
Still, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would be greenlit for the Fox network as part of their new Fox Box Saturday morning programming block, where all their shows were provided by 4Kids. The series proved successful, earning critical acclaim and running for 5 seasons, including an arc that saw the Turtles flung into the future called Fast Forward, before returning to their own time in the final season called Back to the Sewers. This would culminate with a 2009 special celebrating the Turtles' 25th anniversary called Turtles Forever. That would see the 2003 Turtles meet up with not only their 1987 counterparts, but their original black and white comic incarnation as well.
Turtles Forever would receive some praise when it premiered, as there were some nice touches, like having the black and white Turtles talk entirely in inner monologue, a la the comics. That being said, there was also quite a bit of derision. For example, there's a feeling that there was some excessive mocking of the 1987 series for being too reliant on humor and catchphrases and not enough on action, where the proper 2003 series was the cool one that was actually more serious and noteworthy and well thought. You know, they sort of just forgot to take into account that most Ninja Turtles fans came to the genre from the 87 series. That was their gateway, not the comics. Also, budgetary constraints prevented the original voice cast from the 87 series from appearing in the show, so that also kind of left a very empty, hollow feeling. Whereas you look at the crossover between the 2012 Nickelodeon series and the 1987 series as being a much more reverent and proper crossover.
Of course, there would also be a comic book series that would tie in to the new Turtles animated series by Dreamwave Entertainment. More on them later. Dreamwave enlisted legendary comic writer Peter David to do a unique pitch, presenting the Turtles' adventures via the points of view of various bystanders and side characters.
This was a concept that had been explored in other comics, most famously issue number 250 of Batman, which saw the various adventures of the Caped Crusader told from the point of view of a group of kids. This would later be adapted into an episode of the Batman animated series called Legends of the Dark Knight. Likewise, Marvel had 2 Spider-Man books, Tangled Web and Web Spinners, that also followed the Wallcrawler's supporting cast as his various superhero exploits affected them.
As for TMNT, well, if you remember my review of the Transformers story arc The World in Your Eyes, which is in episode 202 of the Random Trade Review, then you would know that Dreamwave was a horribly mismanaged company who basically wound up going kaput overnight. This resulted in their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series only lasting 7 issues.
Thankfully, the new comic book licensors for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, IDW, decided to compile and release the Dreamwave series in its entirety, or at least they did on Comixology. And that's what we're covering today, the 7 issues of Dreamwave's 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series.
2 friends named John and Frank take a picture of themselves as part of a Best Friends Forever promise. The picture is torn in half, with each half going to one of the 2 friends as a reminder to keep their bond no matter what. Their way home is interrupted by a car accident that causes a kid to lose his recently purchased pet turtles. John attempts to grab the reptiles for himself, only for them to suddenly fall down a sewer grate followed by a canister of some weird glowing toxic ooze.
Meanwhile, some other poor kid was rendered blind in this accident as well. I have no idea what happened to him.
Jump to the present of 2003, and Frank is now a rookie beat cop who witnesses an old lady's dachshund being grabbed by a weird-looking robot. Frank grabs the pooch's leash and is yanked through the streets of New York until the bot is suddenly struck by a speeding van.
It's okay. The dog lives.
It's then that Frank recognizes the van's driver. It's John who immediately speeds away, refusing to acknowledge his old buddy, as it turns out that this is a getaway van having pulled off a robbery for the Purple Dragons. Back at the scene of the incident, a confused Frank looks on as three large shadowy figures fly overhead.
The Purple Dragons are effectively the goon squad of the Foot Clan, led by the Shredder. The Dragons' main leader is Han, who becomes a recurring opponent for the Turtles throughout the animated series.
Unbeknownst to the goons, however, they actually wind up having a stowaway in the form of Raphael. Meanwhile, Frank and his partner Sarge begin looking for the van, but Sarge seems to just give up, pointing out while the van did race off rather quickly, they weren't actually speeding and thus they're not technically breaking the law. None of that really seems to matter for the Purple Dragons as the Turtles catch up and begin fighting to free Raph. Soon the brothers are reunited and prepare for more action as John arrives with reinforcements. It doesn't matter as the Purple Dragons are dealt with rather quickly as then foot troopers arrive only to also suffer the same fate. The Turtles then commandeer the van, making sure to drop off as many of the bad guys with Frank and Sarge. Meanwhile, Johnny is brought before the Shredder to explain what happened. Johnny promises that nothing like this will ever happen again, but the Shredder knows it won't, as screams begin emanating from the room.
Yes, that is something that actually happened on the show. The Shredder kills people.
April O'Neil flashes back to her childhood dream of being an investigative TV reporter, pretending to interview her mother about a dinner of turtle soup. However, for April, her father always looked down on the media, having only viewed schlocky tabloid fare, and instead decided to push her into studying more science and engineering. All these flashbacks keep getting interrupted by the Turtles crashing into the room, fighting with several of the robots we saw earlier in the comic. What seems to be causing all of this? Well, April just got an internship with Baxter Stockman, who has developed the ultimate in pest control, the Mouser, a small robot programmed to hunt down and eliminate all vermin, in particular rats.
You know, with the name Mousers, you would think they would only be programmed to hunt mice, but I guess not. And yes, this is pretty much an adaptation of an issue we covered all the way back in episode 54 of the Random Trade Review, where we covered the first few issues of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics.
However, April soon notices that several hundred Mousers have not yet come online. Baxter chalks it up to just bugs in the system and tells her to pay no mind, but the old reporter's instincts kick in as April soon discovers that the offline Mousers are in fact programmed to burrow into a nearby bank and rob it for Stockman's true employer, the Shredder. April soon got found out and Baxter Stockman sicked the Mousers on her, which drove her into the sewers. She got cornered, however she was soon rescued by none other than the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which caused her to faint, and then Michelangelo picking her up asking if the group can keep her. While the Turtles take April back to their lair to rest and regroup, Baxter Stockman unleashes his Mousers on several banks. It brings him back to his high school days, where the ever-nerdy Baxter was constantly being tormented by the captain of the football team, who was named Tom. Of course, it doesn't help that Baxter was pining away after Tom's girlfriend, April.
This is a different person who just also happens to be named April. It's not April O'Neil. And yeah, if you ever figured it out, Baxter Stockman is an incel. I guess that kind of makes sense.
Baxter then rigged a football used in the homecoming game to be controlled remotely. When a pass was thrown in Tom's direction, the ball suddenly began veering all around the field, causing Tom to crash into the goalpost. The action so distressed everyone that they began unloading all of their emotional problems onto the misery chick.
I know he died. I'm sorry he died. But I'm not going to pretend he was some great person when he wasn't.
Unfortunately, Baxter celebrating was just a tad too boisterous and everyone turned their anger onto him. In the hospital, Stockman was approached by Han in order to join the Purple Dragons. Once again, returning to the present of 2003, April and the Turtles began sneaking their way into Baxter's lab in order to take out the master control computer for the Mousers. However, he's more than aware of their presence and pulls what is effectively a self-destruct maneuver, calling the Mousers back to attack the facility and take out his new enemies. Baxter then uses an escape hatch to run away, only to immediately bump into Han, who takes him back to the Shredder. Baxter pleads for his life, but Shredder has other plans for him and orders him to be taken away. The Shredder has then provided some security footage from one of the wrecked Mousers, which shows the heat signatures of the Turtles.
I hope you've all enjoyed the Shredder's appearance in these comics, because this is the last one. It's kind of why I didn't delve too much into his character arc from the 2003 series. As for Baxter Stockman, well, he would eventually become a severed head piloting a giant robot. Anyway, let's move on to another Turtle supporting character, Casey Jones.
Casey Jones grew up in the heart of Purple Dragons territory, and his father was the only one to stand up to the gang and not pay any protection money. Unfortunately, after one encounter, Casey's father soon disappeared, and the Purple Dragons burned the family store down to the ground. Now, Casey Jones stalked the night, attempting to thwart criminals and track down the location of the Purple Dragons so he could try to eliminate the group once for all. Soon, though, on one of his adventures, he winds up encountering Raphael, who attempts to talk him down, which naturally leads the two to begin fighting.
Again, this is basically an adaptation of a plot we covered in episode 54.
Eventually, Casey manages to land a shot with a golf club and then hops on a motorcycle to track down the Purple Dragons. He tracks down one of their leaders to their apartment and overhears the man beating his child. When Casey intercedes, the kid begins pleading for the vigilante to leave his father alone.
I'm not the bad guy, kid.
Realizing that he's crossed a line, Casey slinks back to his home. He's still willing to fight, but maybe he needs to find a different way.
Okay, so basically these issues that we've covered up to this point have been adaptations of the first 3 or possibly 4 episodes of the 2003 animated series, just telling the events from a different point of view. However, at this point, we now go off into our own original stories. They're no longer adapting episodes.
Raphael helps a young girl get her cat down from a tree branch. He tries to be discreet, keeping with the ninja ideal of sticking to the shadows. And yet, he can't help but wonder if maybe just getting a little bit of attention would really be so bad. It's then that the spirit of Master Splinter tries to make the hot-headed turtle understand that it's not about fame or fortune or glory, it's just about doing the right thing at the right time, and that society will never truly understand what the turtles are.
Again, taking another point from the comics here, at this point in the television series, Splinter was being held prisoner at the TCRI building.
However, Raph decides to throw caution to the wind and drops down in front of the kid, who immediately confuses him for a lizard before thanking him. Raph prepares to bask in a little bit of glory until he overhears the girl talking with her mother about what happened, followed by a loud smacking sound. Unaware that it's just the girl's mother attempting to swat a fly with a rolled-up magazine, Raph decides to leap into the apartment to try to figure out what's going on. However, all it does is cause the woman to faint and the girl to become a little bit frightened.
I'm not the bad guy, kid.
Raph apologizes and clears out for a few days. However, when he returns, he finds out from the little girl that her mother was taken to Belle Reeve Psychiatric Facility. So Raphael heads down to Belle Reeve, where he overhears the mother's therapy session, where she mentions being attacked by a humanoid frog. After the session is over, he intercedes with the doctor to point out that the woman is not lying, and that he's a turtle. The doctor snaps and tases Raphael before charging up to the roof while carrying a large firearm, though thankfully not before signing the mother's discharge papers. Raph struggles to the feet and gets to the roof, where he finds the doctor opening fire on the populace, including the daughter who's down in the streets below. He knocks the doctor out and heads back into the shadows to monitor the family from afar, having learned a very, very valuable lesson. Back at April's apartment building in the curio shop she runs part-time, her young employee Daraj takes a nap. He dreams of using his elite kung fu fighting skills to fight off a local gang and thus win the heart of Jaya, a young girl he has a crush on. All of this is witnessed by Leonardo, who worries about Daraj not really knowing what to do in a real fight. Well, wouldn't you know it, just as he rounds the corner from the shop, Daraj spots a group of thugs accosting Jaya. He squares off for a fight, but freezes, which allows the gang to just beat the living snot out of him. It's only thanks to the interference of a shopkeep that the thugs disappear. Daraj stumbles back to the shop, where he collapses in front of April.
Again, taking another point from the comics here, at this point in the television series, Splinter was being held prisoner at the TCRI building.
April decides to let Leo talk with Daraj in order to point out that sparring is not the same as a real fight, as when you're sparring with someone you know when to hold back, and the thuggies won't do such things. When Daraj admits to being afraid, Leo points out that everyone's afraid when they enter a fight. However, victory comes from the belief that you can override those fears. Leonardo works on rebuilding Daraj's confidence so that the next time he encounters the thuggies, he's able to make quick work of them and, of course, win Jaya's affections.
Look, this is still a title aimed primarily at young children. We don't need to get into a whole discussion on damsel in distress representation in media right now, okay?
Not to mention, the thuggies' leader now wants Daraj to join their ranks. That being said, Leo hasn't given up focus and asks Casey Jones for any information on the gang. He points Leo towards an abandoned movie theater the group has been known to hang out at before going after the Purple Dragons once again. While Leo assembles his brothers, the Thuggies get about by kidnapping Jaya and thus luring Daraj into the theater. The leader promises to let Jaya go if Daraj joins the Thuggies, however, should he refuse, they'll sacrifice her to Kali.
Yes, the Thuggies actually think they can summon Kali with some type of mystical ritual. I make an Indiana Jones joke here, but I'm just too bored.
The Turtles witness what's been happening and decide to help Daraj by having Leo and Raph dressing up as a pantomime Kali and Michelangelo using the building's PA system for a voice. It distracts the Thuggies just long enough for the Turtles to get the jump on them and take the group out, as Daraj gets Jaya to safety, attempting to convince her that really was just the Hindu deity acting the whole time.
And that concludes Dreamwave's comic book based on the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series. Those turtles would not get another comic book representation until a small piece in a large one-shot celebrating the turtles' overall 40th anniversary. So this is really it for them in comics. How was it? Well, I do think there's some nice artwork throughout all of this. It's very evocative of the television series while still having its own tone and style. It's not entirely the comics, it's not entirely the animated stuff, so I think it's a good blending of the two. And I do like the idea of telling the Turtles' adventures from different points of view. I do think that's a nice narrative format that helps introduce the Turtles in a different way. Unfortunately, that's kind of where the compliments end. I think when this starts telling its own original stories and not adapting episodes, it gets kind of dull. I don't care about Diraj and the Thuggy guys. I don't really care about anything else. It's just kind of bland. Again, I think we kind of already get Raph's story with the Casey Jones story, so I don't know what they were going for there. And it just sort of, it felt a little repetitious. And then, not only that, we get basically two Raphael stories, because we get him and Casey Jones, then we get him learning the lesson about the Turtles being exposed to the public. And then we basically get two Leo stories, as he's the spiritual guide for Daraj here. So the other Turtles, Michelangelo and Donatello, don't really get much in the way of representation. Now, granted, the series was canceled after 7 issues, so maybe they would have if it had gone on, but still, it does feel like those two get left out in the cold. And again, this is all kind of a shame because the 2003 animated series, I think, has kind of gotten lost to the sands of time. The stuff from the Nickelodeon era of the Turtles has been way more popular. Even stuff like Rise of the TMNT or the most recent one that just got canceled. I can't think of what its name is. It was starting on Paramount Plus. Again, it's based on the new movie. I think those were Tales of the TMNT. That's what it is. Sorry. I think those have gotten way more representation. Like I said, they've definitely gotten a bit more representation in the comics. There's the comics are doing their own thing now away from this. So again, it would have been kind of nice to maybe see this go on in some aspect, but alas, it didn't really seem to happen. And unless you are, like I said, a big fan of that adaptation or incarnation, I should say, of the Ninja Turtles, you're probably better off just starting with the new IDW stuff and going from there. Really, this is only interesting to maybe the most diehard of Turtles fans. I am going to be giving this 2003 TMNT series, this 2003 TMNT series a D. It's okay, but there's just nothing really to sell to a lot of people. Okay, so this is going to be the last episode of the Random Trade Review for 2025. There's a lot of football stuff I have to cover. I literally have to cover 10 conference championship games in a couple of weeks, so I need time to kind of get that taken care of. So we're going to be doing the next one in a little over a month from now. So this will be the first episode of 2026 on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can support my work at patreon.com/CP for Cat Productions, where you can even request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be notified for further videos.